So what is the Formula Mod Shock all about? So you're going to find out the real deal, non-marketing video. Basically, this is a used shock from Canada. A fellow watcher of the channel let me borrow it because he said, basically, Formula is absolutely legendary and you need to try this shock. So I looked for one in the United States and I couldn't find them. There's like one oddball size left, so maybe they're pulling out of the United States. So to give you a little background on this shock, it was freshly serviced and upgraded, so it has a bigger lower eyelet here, and supposedly it's safer for yoke bikes. So there's no absolutely safe shock for specialized bikes, but safer. So I remember looking at this shock long ago and it said you must mount the eyelets like this. Can't have any yoke strut on the bike. If you're not familiar with a strut yoke, it's basically every specialized bike except for the demo. So at the time, I had all specialized bikes. So I was like, oh, I'm just gonna skip that one. So that's one of the reasons I bought the Rocky Mountain. It's extraordinarily friendly to coils and shocks. So this one's freshly serviced, but it's definitely an older model. Historically, I feel like European brands don't really change things up for the sake of changing. Like every single year, RockShox has like a new air can or something. So basically, this is an old ass shock that's been freshly serviced with a slight upgrade. The key features of the Formula Mod Shock, from my research, I don't like reading off scripts, is we have a tunable valve here, and I like watch their video. It's super easy to change the compression tune right here. And one of my favorite things about this shock, even though I haven't rode it quite yet, they use a bladder because they know bladders are better. Like all the good shock brands know, regardless of dyno data, that bladders make it better. I could tell you all the little scientific stuff, but I don't really care. Just know they're better. So basically this has all the secret sauces except for hydraulic bottom out. One unique thing, I kind of like what they're doing here. On the compression side, they don't have high and low speed. It's just compression. So basically you add a lot of high speed compression to an Olin shock and it chokes up the low speed movements. So there's no true high and low speed separation. One does influence the other. So basically, let's go get this on the test track. It's been a very busy summer, so minimal editing in this video, and I'm the otter, so let's jump in. So the only shock of every single shock I've ever rode that I personally keep is right here. So maybe it'll be this one next. So Paul in Canada, I told him to send me the spring. It's just cool to have the native spring with the damper, but it's perfectly fine. I got plenty of springs. We got EXT springs, but you always want to start out with the spring decks with some fresh new stuff. So one unique feature of the Formula Mod Shock is basically 95 PSI inside of the piggyback. So it's a very low pressure inside of here. So we got to go get the $10,000 dyno. So I built this poster as kind of a buyer's guide. So the Formula Mod Shock, I haven't personally rode yet, but I'm going to put it in the same category as DVO, as highly tunable bladder shock, but we're going to have to see. So we're going to the test track as per usual with the spring decks. First thing that sticks out to me on the Formula Mod Shock, This thing has got a extra large piggyback, so we can tune. It's the only shock besides DVO, I think, that they really encourage you to tune the actual shock internal piston air pressure thingy right here. We're gonna make sure that's tight. Pull it out of the car and do a little bit of setup and then take it on a different trail. Parking lot setup. Okay, locked off compression. Oh my God, sorry. Okay, locked off compression. I weigh 197 pounds, which is 90 kilograms. I definitely lost some weight. So Paul told me he put the medium compression tune inside of this. So even just bouncing around here in the parking lot, I'm just like clapping it out into the bump stop. So I definitely need the heavy compression, what's it called? Tune valve thing. So I obviously don't have it and want to go ride my bike. So we're running 550 pound spring. So I'm going to go up to 570 and try it again. So free flowing piston is one of the selling points of this. So basically there's a lot of oil slamming around inside of the shock. So which means it's less supportive with a low internal floating piston gas charge. This is like a recipe for a broken shock on a Specialized bike without the hydraulic bottom out or a progressive spring. So with 20 pounds on spring pressure, let me try it again. All right, so there's some serious top out. Totally forgot to warm up. I haven't rode a bike in like almost a month. And then I put a new shock on my bike and just go full speed through there. So hopefully my ankle is not too bruised. It definitely hit my funny bone, but it's not broken. So I could probably carry on with this. So more or less, everything in suspension is kind of like a trade-off. So it's a very active shock. 1, 2. Okay, full slow rebound. 1, 2, 3. 3 back from dead slow. So basically I had to cut that ride short because my ankle is like on fire and I gotta switch pedals. So there may be a part 2 in this, but basically the test track tells me everything I need to know about a shock. The Formula Mod shock is a very poppy reactive shock. Definitely in my top rating system. If you watch the Coil shock ranking video, having not rode the Formula Mod shock, it is perfectly in the right position. So I'm sorry to tell you it's not the best feeling Coil shock I've ever rode. The test track is the most shittiest place for a coil. Coil shocks eat chunk. Amazing. That's why I like them. So there's no real reason to go eat some chunk in it. Is the shock reactive or is it more stable? Basically, you got to choose which coil shock you want. In that video, you can find out more. So my major complaints inside of the Formula Mod shock was basically the rebound. I could not get the rebound dialed. So basically, I started from 7 from fully open. We have 14 total clicks, so I started in the middle. and it was usable, but it wasn't the right rebound. I think the valving is a little bit funky in my opinion for my bike, for my body weight. I'm 197 pounds. I don't know if that's 90 kilos or not. So we have 17 clicks of compression. The compression range is very limited. So that's the middle one according to Paul. I'll re-verify with him later and I'll put a title here if it's different. So basically from fully open to middle to full lock-on compression, there's just really not that much. So it tells me it's some form of a shim stack inside of the cartridge that you can swap out. So that's a good and a bad thing, just like everything in suspension. It's a very fine-tuned adjustment, but there is clearly not enough bottom out control built into that little valve thing or the main piston. So going into my notes here, we have a 30 millimeter high flow piston. So basically, I can start putting shocks into different categories. So a high flow piston is moving oil like crazy. So it creates this unique type of feel. So most recently, I was riding the Vorsprung Telem. The Telem has a high flow feel. Basically the oil is moving really fast. EXT Öhlins, they have their own type of feel and it's not a free flowing piston. It's a more restrictive feel. Personally, I like the EXT and Öhlins feel better than the free flowing piston style, but you be the judge of that. So we do have the reinforced. So this is an old shock that has the reinforcement eyelid and stanchion for side loadings and etc. But that doesn't fix the underlying issue of that shock doing hard bottom outs. The Rocky Mountain is a 37%. I'm running it in 37% progressive and basically clapping into the bump stop in the parking lot. So there's just not enough valving inside of there to like stop it from bottoming out in a heavyweight rider. So if we look at my coil shock poster, I put DVO and Formula right next to each other. Formula is a little bit taller than DVO. So having not rode the Formula Mod Shock, I just put it into the category with DVO and it's very similar to the DVO Jade X Prime. Basically, the stock internal valving on the main piston is not quite satisfactory for big dudes. Most of the negative stuff I stay in videos, the brands end up fixing later on. Either it's common sense or they watch my videos, so trying to keep it real here. To be perfectly honest, the Formula Mod Shock has no place if you're a 200-pound rider unless you get some heavy valving on the main piston with the heavy cartridge. The lack of hydraulic bottom out is a truly disappointing experience from such a well-respected brand such as Formula. There's just basically no excuse in 2025 to not have hydraulic bottom out externally adjustable on your coil shock. Even with a super progressive frame like the Rocky Mountain that's extraordinarily friendly to coil shocks. My quick search on the internet about the Formula Mod Shocks, negative always sells, so let's keep it negative here. So the weak points reported on the forums pages, just basically took a couple notes. The early Formula Mod Shocks had noise, early lockout noise. I didn't even try it on the lockout. That is one thing to note about that shock. It is just absolutely like bobbing through the travel, and I'm hypothesizing, which means I'm guessing the free-flowing piston makes that shock wallow around in its travel. And I didn't even test the climb switch because I'm on an e-bike. Now, another complaint I found on the forums pages, honestly, you're better off getting reviews from Reddit because they're like real reviews, because being a YouTuber, journalist, review guy, you have to be like completely brand subservient and throw your audience under the bus if you want to be respected by the brands. I've just kind of gave up being respected by the brands. So according to the forums pages, the rebound is very limited with heavy springs, improved in later models. So the shock Paul let me borrow is an early model that's been retrofitted. So it's an early model with limited heavy springs. So once again, back to the Formula Mod Shock, this is not the ideal shock if you weigh more than 180 pounds. I personally know there's massive reservoir clearances with the Formula Mod Shock just by looking at it. And then one time I almost bought one. It was on the Pink Bike Classified and the guy had shaved the head of the piggyback off because it wouldn't fit inside of like a Kenevo SL or a Specialized Enduro or something. And then some people are complaining about the weight penalty. Maybe it's a heavy shock. I forgot to weigh it. So basically, when I put it on the $10,000 dyno, the breakaway pressure was about 27 pounds, which is the only shock that comes close to that is the Cane Creek and the old Fox DHX2, which are true twin tube shocks. I couldn't find anything about Formula being a twin tube shock. Their major selling point is user-friendly CTS tuning, changing the valving stack on it. There's like 5 tune models, and it's just basically off of your weight. We really need an external hydraulic bottom out. So it's tunable, but it's not like ultra tunable. We'll go into the ultra tunable later with the Vorsprung. To be honest, it's not that impressive of a shock. I think the most disappointing thing with the Formula Mod shock, and once again, most of the negative stuff I say brands fix later on, they make a dual crown fork. And then they make a 35 millimeter stanchion fork. I don't even remember what it's called. I saw it for sale at Universal Cycles. Super expensive 35 millimeter shock. But if we reference my poster, the Formula Mod shock is very similar to DVO. So that means if you want a single crown 38 millimeter stanchion fork that's gonna match the personality of your Formula Mod shock, 100% it's gonna be the DVO 38 Onyx SL version, not the Coil one. That like super buttery feel straight off the top. So I was riding a 180 Fox 38 and it works. I think the worst match for the Formula Mod shock would be like Charger 3 Zeb, kind of more progressive forks. Has a very unique feel. So I don't understand why Italians think that 38 millimeter stanchion single crown forks are a bad idea, but for some reason they do. Like I have the EXT fork hanging up there, 36. It's just, honestly, it's a marketing blunder for them not to make a 38 millimeter stanchion fork. I know they reinforce it and do all this stuff, but the true reality is trail on trail, 36 versus 38. 38 steers better. Can't measure that flex deflection in the laboratory or the dyno. Like on the trail, 38s feel better. So if you do want to match it up, it's the DVO Onyx 38. And if you can get a hold of that WP1, that's a truly amazing fork. So it's possible. We're gonna go part 2. I gotta take the clip pedals off my bike and hopefully my ankle doesn't swell up any more than it does. But if you click this video here about the Coil shock ranking system, it's an unfiltered, unbiased buyer's guide review, and I'm working on part 2 for another time.